February 18, 1943. Kasserine Pass, western Tunisia. An American tank commander watches through the dust as an unfamiliar silhouette emerges between the rocky ridges. It is larger than anything his unit has encountered before, its broad tracks climbing broken ground that would slow most armored vehicles, its thick frontal armor reflecting the afternoon sun. Within moments, the first American shells strike the German vehicle and ricochet harmlessly away. Return fire follows with devastating precision. One American tank burns, then another. Men who had expected to face the familiar Panzer III and Panzer IV suddenly find themselves confronting a machine that seems almost immune to everything they can throw at it. Reports moving back through American headquarters describe a weapon unlike any they had previously faced. The Tiger tank had announced its presence, and it left an impression that would endure long after the battle itself. For many American soldiers, the Tiger quickly became a symbol of German technological superiority. Intelligence summaries, battlefield reports, and wartime journalism all contributed to an image of an unstoppable armored predator capable of dominating any battlefield it entered. Even decades after the war, popular culture would reinforce that reputation, portraying the Tiger as the undisputed king of armored warfare. Yet history presents a more complicated picture. The same tank that shocked inexperienced American formations in North Africa and later in parts of Western Europe had already spent years fighting another opponent whose experience against German armor stretched back to the opening campaigns of the war. British forces encountered Tigers under very different circumstances. By the time they met them in significant numbers in Tunisia and later in Normandy, British commanders had accumulated years of hard-earned experience fighting German armored doctrine across France, North Africa, and Italy. They had studied German tactics, refined their own anti-tank methods, improved artillery coordination, and increasingly viewed the Tiger not as an invincible machine but as a dangerous system with identifiable strengths and equally important weaknesses. This contrast raises a question that appears almost contradictory. How could the same tank that deeply unsettled many American units fail to produce the same strategic effect against Britain? The answer is not found simply in armor thickness, gun caliber, or mechanical specifications. It lies in doctrine, logistics, battlefield experience, intelligence gathering, and the very different ways two Allied armies approached armored warfare. Understanding that difference requires looking beyond the Tiger itself and examining the battlefield environment into which it was introduced, because the weapon alone never determined the outcome. The army facing it often mattered far more than the machine itself. The British reaction to the Tiger began before the Americans had fully understood what had hit them. It was not calm because the tank was weak. It was calm because the British Army had already learned, painfully, that panic was useless against German armor. In the desert, every new German weapon had first appeared as a shock and then become a problem to be measured, categorized, and attacked through method rather than mythology. The Tiger was dangerous precisely because it combined three qualities in one vehicle: a powerful 88mm gun, heavy frontal armor, and excellent optics that allowed German crews to strike accurately at ranges where many Allied tanks struggled to reply. But the British did not treat those qualities as evidence of invincibility. They treated them as a set of conditions. That difference mattered. British anti-tank thinking had already changed during the North African campaign. The early 2-pounder gun had become inadequate as German armor improved. The 6-pounder, introduced into the desert fighting in 1942, gave British units a far more serious answer, but the arrival of the Tiger forced another escalation. The 17-pounder was rushed forward because the British understood the central lesson very quickly. The Tiger could not always be beaten by courage, numbers, or ordinary tank gunnery. It had to be beaten by positioning, ambush, artillery, mines, and guns powerful enough to punish it when its tactical advantages disappeared. This was why British encounters with the Tiger often looked different from American first impressions. Against the Americans at Kasserine, the Tiger arrived as a psychological event. Against the British in Tunisia, it increasingly became an intelligence target. British units wanted to know its armor layout, its weak points, its mechanical limits, and the behavior of its crews. The capture of a Tiger in Tunisia in April 1943 was therefore not just a battlefield trophy. It was a technical windfall, Engineers, gunners, and intelligence officers could examine the machine directly, not as rumor, but as steel, bolts, welds, turret mechanisms, ammunition storage, and armor plate. The result was not that British soldiers stopped respecting the Tiger. They respected it intensely, but respect and fear are not the same thing. Fear exaggerates a weapon until it becomes a legend. Respect studies it until the legend begins to shrink back into a machine. By the time British forces faced Tigers again in Italy and Normandy, they were no longer confronting an unknown monster. They were confronting a heavy tank whose strengths were real, whose weaknesses were documented, and whose survival depended heavily on the tactical situation around it. The clearest example came not from a duel between tanks, but from the British habit of turning German armor into a planned target before it could become a battlefield surprise. In January 1943, in Tunisia's Roba Valley, a Tiger moved forward with other German vehicles into ground watched by British anti-tank gunners. The vehicle was not beaten because British crews had suddenly discovered some secret weakness in its design. It was beaten because it entered an ambush. 6-pounder guns, placed where their crews could fire from concealment and exploit the side of the German advance, opened at close range. The Tiger burned. Some of its crew were killed or captured. The event mattered because it gave the British Army something that fear rarely gives an army: proof that the machine could die. That proof changed the way the Tiger was understood. Its armor was thickest where German doctrine expected the enemy to shoot first, across the front. Its gun was lethal when its crew could choose the range and hold the initiative. But the Tiger was not equally protected from every angle, and it was not equally useful in every situation. It was heavy, expensive, mechanically demanding, and dependent on recovery vehicles, spare parts, fuel, and routes strong enough to carry it. In open ground, with a trained crew and time to observe, it could dominate. In broken country, under artillery fire, against hidden anti-tank guns and carefully coordinated defensive positions, it became something less mythical and more vulnerable. A powerful tank force to fight inside someone else's plan. This was the British method at its most effective. They did not need every tank to defeat a Tiger frontally. They needed a battlefield arranged so that the Tiger's best qualities were narrowed and its worst limitations became unavoidable. Mines slowed the approach. Artillery disrupted supporting infantry and forced crews to button down. Anti-tank guns waited until German armor committed itself. Reconnaissance reported movement before it became contact. And by early 1943, the 17-pounder began entering service because the British had concluded that the Tiger required a gun built for the problem, not merely courage thrown against armor plate. The contrast with the American shock at Kasserine is important. The Americans first experienced the Tiger as a rupture in expectation. The British had already turned that rupture into procedure. They still feared the Tiger's gun. They still respected its armor. But they increasingly understood that the question was not whether the Tiger was superior in a clean duel. The real question was how often Britain could prevent that clean duel from happening at all. Normandy then turned the argument into its final form. In June 1944, British and Canadian forces landed with a clearer understanding of the Tiger than the Americans had possessed in Tunisia in February 1943. They did not possess perfect tanks. In fact, Britain's own wartime tank development had been troubled by compromises, reliability problems, and weapons that often lagged behind German armor protection. But by 1944, the British had done something more practical than produce one flawless tank. They had adapted an existing one. The Sherman Firefly placed the 17-pounder into the familiar Sherman chassis, and although the result was cramped, awkward, and never elegant, it gave British armored units a weapon that could seriously threaten the Tiger and Panther at normal battlefield ranges. That changed the psychology of the fight. A Tiger crew could still dominate ordinary Shermans if it found them first. Its 88mm gun could still kill at distances where a standard Sherman's 75mm gun was badly disadvantaged. But the Tiger commander now had to consider that one of the Shermans in the troop might not be ordinary at all. British crews knew this, and German crews learned it. Fireflies were often treated as priority targets because their long 17-pounder gun identified them as the vehicle most likely to kill heavy German armor before it could impose its own rules on the engagement. Yet even the Firefly does not fully explain why the Tiger struggled to produce decisive results against Britain. The deeper answer lay in the British systems surrounding it. In Normandy, British armor usually fought as part of a combined battlefield. Artillery, infantry, engineers, anti-tank guns, reconnaissance, and air power all pressing against German positions at the same time. That system did not always move quickly, could be cautious, costly, and frustratingly methodical. But it denied the Tiger the kind of clean, isolated duel on which its legend depended. The bocage, villages, ridgelines, and wheat fields around can rarely allow heavy German armor to act as pure hunters. A Tiger that revealed itself risked artillery concentration. A Tiger that stayed hidden surrendered initiative. A Tiger that moved forward without infantry support became vulnerable to mines, flanking fire, or close assault weapons. A Tiger that waited too long might be bypassed or pinned in place while the wider battle moved around it. Britain did not need to prove that every Sherman could beat every Tiger. It needed to make the Tiger fight inside a battlefield where its superiority was constantly interrupted. In the final accounting, the Tiger struggled against Britain not because British soldiers discovered a simple antidote, but because Britain refused to give the Tiger the kind of war in which it looked unbeatable. The machine had been designed to dominate from prepared ground, at long range, with skilled crews and supporting arms protecting its flanks. When those conditions existed, British units suffered heavily. But the British response was to attack the conditions themselves. They did not try to turn every encounter into a heroic frontal duel. They used artillery to break up German coordination, engineers to open routes or lay mines, anti-tank guns to cover likely approaches, and Fireflies to make even German heavy tank crews hesitate before exposing themselves. This is where the Tiger's legend becomes misleading. A weapon can be technically superior and operationally limiting at the same time. The Tiger weighed around 57 tons, used a complex transmission and suspension system, consumed fuel Germany could not easily spare, and required recovery and maintenance resources that were always under pressure. Only about 1,354 Tiger ones were produced, a small number compared with the mass of Allied armored vehicles arriving in Northwest Europe. Every Tiger lost was difficult to replace. Every Tiger immobilized by terrain, mechanical failure, fuel shortage, air attack, or artillery pressure was no longer the battlefield terror described in frontline rumors. It was an expensive German asset trapped inside an Allied campaign of material exhaustion. Britain understood that reality earlier than most because it had spent years fighting German armor before the Tiger became famous to the Americans. From the Western Desert to Tunisia, from Italy to Normandy, British doctrine had been shaped by repeated punishment. The result was not perfection. British armored operations could still be slow, costly, and at times badly handled. But by 1944, British commanders had learned that German heavy tanks were most dangerous when treated as monsters and most manageable when treated as machines inside a system. That is the answer to the contradiction. The Tiger shocked the American army because its first appearances collided with inexperience, weak expectations, and inadequate anti-tank preparation. Against Britain, it faced an opponent already conditioned by years of German armored warfare. Britain respected the Tiger, studied it, captured it, tested it, built weapons against it, and then forced it to fight under circumstances where its strengths were never allowed to stand alone. The tank remained formidable, but against a British army that had learned to turn fear into procedure, formidable was not the same as decisive. And that is why the Tiger's battlefield legend, terrifying as it was, could not save Germany from the wider war it was slowly losing. If this account gave you a clearer understanding of how doctrine, experience, and battlefield systems mattered more than legend, then leave a like, subscribe, and stay with us for the next forgotten story of the Second World War.